Good. We are continuing in our study of Haggai this morning, and I'd like to finish the book if we can. Good luck with that, right? I always say that, ever optimistic. But the last two sermons are in chapter 2 of the 4-sermon outline of the book of Haggai, and I think we can cover these two, and then we'll be ready to move into Malachi next week as the last of God's messengers to his people before he sends his son. Actually, before he sends Elijah, John the Baptist, to prepare the way for his son. And so I hope we've gathered a lot from these books, this course of study that we've been taking. We did back up in the timeline a little bit to pick up Haggai after Zechariah, but Malachi will be right there with them in the same time frame as Haggai. So that's where we are in the timeline. 16 years or so has gone by since the remnant has returned to Jerusalem. The foundation with great ceremony was laid on top of Mount Zion where everybody could see it every single day. And then for 14 years, it sat with grass growing in it. And it wasn't because they didn't have the money to do it, because the kings of Persia had sent everything they needed to get this job done. And God had also provided them every opportunity to get this job done. They just decided not to do it. There's always a great reason not to go do your chores, isn't there? Well, the grass doesn't quite look like it needs to be mowed. It can wait a day or two. Besides, it looks like it might rain. Right? I mean, I know all those excuses about grass mowing because I've been grass mowing since I was 10, right? And it's just, we can always think up a reason not to do something, can't we? And so when we look at this situation and these prophets, Haggai is extremely focused among this group of prophets. Build the temple. You know, you could almost say these people would all line up and give their excuses and procrastination and indifference and whatever angle they had. They would come and lay it at Haggai's feet. And you know what? He'd look at them, build the temple. Build the temple. There was no ignoring that message. And after, you get told something 3 and 4 times, do you keep going back to that person with excuses? No, because you know what? They're going to give you the same direction every single time, right? Every time. Build the temple. Have you done that yet? Well, then go do that. Well, I've got other reasons not to. Well, go do that. So that is, in essence, what's happening here. And so we see now, where's my clicker there? There it is. We see now in, oh, will not be defeated. What's going on with that? Turn it on and turn it down. Our battery may be bad for us, Larry. We see now in these 4 lessons or sermons, we've got 3 and 4 to do, and the idea is to confirm them in their work. And then the last lesson is a very short one, is to assure them that what they're doing is in fact God's will. And we all need that sometimes in our directions, don't we? So let's look at chapter 2, starting in verse 10. We see this 3rd sermon of Zechariah's, and it's dated. We have a time date stamp on it, 24th of the 9th month in the 2nd year of Darius. The Lord came to Haggai and he gave him this message. So let's look at a couple of things. What's the problem that the 3rd sermon has to address? Sermons always have reasons, don't they, Larry? It's just not that, well, I got to preach Sunday, so I'll just go to my Rolodex of lessons and just close my eyes and pull one out. You put preparation time in it for specific reasons so that it's applicable and helpful to the audience. Haggai's no different. So in this 3rd sermon, what's the problem? The way I captured it was they need a booster shot. They have been encouraged. They've been exhorted in the first lesson. They've been kind of given them the mirror to look at themselves in, to see themselves clearly. They've been motivated. That was sermon 1, really, right? And they've been given the assurance that God is going to support them in this work. And they've started doing the work. But it's gotten hard. It's gotten hard. So they need a booster shot of godliness. They've allowed what to enter into their lives in this 16-year period from when they came back as the great remnant of God? What did they allow to creep back in? What did Ezra deal with them about? Ezra and Haggai, they're dealing with these, it's the same people, folks. What was Haggai's issue? Ezra's issues with the people. Just name the big one. In that 16 years, what had they done?
Well, they'd gotten lazy.
Gotten lazy, but what had they done in their family life?
Oh, they'd mixed.
They had married and had mixed marriages. So the remnant, this chosen few from the remnant of Israel, volunteers, they come back, and in the 16 years remaining, what have they done? They've diluted their enthusiasm. They've diluted their potency with all of those marriages. And Ezra was dealing with that. Well, guess what? That's going on at the same time Haggai's preaching his sermons. How energetic is the man in the family going to be to take time away from his livelihood to go work on the temple if his wife is a Philistine? What's going to be breakfast that morning like? What's the conversation around the dinner table going to be like?
Then you do list.
Yeah, there's all kinds of ways this could go, right? She could try to keep that guy so busy he doesn't have time to go to the temple to do his job. Or she could be malicious compliant, right? If you're going to get your clothes that dirty going to work on that temple, you can wash them yourself. So the laundry piles up. But if he doesn't go, laundry gets done. You think those kind of people were any different than we are? They aren't. They can be just as mean and malicious and sneaky with one another as we are today. That's what's the situation here, folks. So they need a booster shot of godliness. Ezra's providing his part, but Haggai is putting this problem right in front of them. And so the purpose then of this third sermon is this message of reminding them. This is what's inside their booster shot. This project is what God wants. That kind of puts it back into perspective, doesn't it? Why are we doing what we're doing? If for no other reason, because God said so. Because God said so. Now apply that to us today for just a moment. Why do we sing in our worship?
Praise God.
Because God said so. He said so. Look over the book of Ephesians. You can read it right there. He said to sing. So that's why we sing. Why do we partake of the Lord's Supper? Because God said so. He gave us examples to follow of early Christians who heard it directly from Jesus Christ, who were present when he instituted it, when he was still alive on earth, the night before he died. He told his brethren, do this in remembrance of me. Okay? He said so. These people have been told, build the temple. And after a few months, they just kind of forgot, why are we doing this again? Have you ever done that? You ever walk into a room somewhere and forget why you went there? Yesterday, we were late to Bible read. A few minutes. You know why? Because I got all the way to the 5th Street exit before I remembered I was supposed to go pick up Marty. So Joni was like, you want to leave? You want to drop me off first? In other words, take her all the way in and then me go all the way back and get my. I was like, no, you're the reason that we blame her. You're the reason why we didn't get Marty because we were so talking about, I forget what it was now, some spiritual stuff. And we were talking religious stuff and we were batting things so back and forth. I'm just driving out a road. I was in auto mode. I mean, Tesla has nothing on me because I was just in auto mode. And I get to Fifth Street and I'm like, oh, forgot to get Marty. Round we go to go back and get Marty. Now, when I got in the car, I knew I had to go get Marty, and then I was going to go get Marty. But by the time I got to Pantops, Marty was the farthest thing from my head. I needed the booster shot to remind me, and then I blamed Joni for not giving me that booster shot. She should have been elbowing me and said, don't get in that lane. You got to go get Marty first. Oh, yeah, I knew that. I totally forgot. They need reminding too, don't they? Are people? Do we need reminders? Anybody carry reminders or actually use that app on their phone? This thing called a calendar. Oh yeah. Man, when I was working, I used to have a day planner that I carried. It was about as big as my Bible. And I didn't go to work without it. That's where all my notes were. That's where my calendar was. That's where all my meeting schedules was. That's where all my phone numbers were. Now they might have been in my phone as well, but they were in that book. And man, did I feel lost if I didn't have that book with me. We need reminders. These people needed it too. This project is God's. You can forget things. 3 months has passed. Why are finals hard, Amy? Why are finals in college classes hard? Because you get them in December and they ask you questions about what they taught you in August. Now, what's the problem with that? We forget. We got great at least I got great short-term memory, right? But I have a hard time remembering things way back in August and September from college classes to take a test in December when all I'm thinking about is getting home for Christmas, right? It's hard. 3 months has gone by for these people since they were so motivated and so challenged. It says they got in and they got the work started. And Haggai and Zechariah too was both mentioned, having renovated the work. So the question is, for them right now, what's more important? The project or the peace? Who's more important? What God wants or what I want? Getting kind of hard to get out of bed every day. You know, Israel is not Florida climate-wise. There's warm weather and dry. And in Jerusalem, there's cold weather in the winter. And sometimes it snows in Jerusalem. Okay. How do you like getting out of bed and going to work outside at 6 o'clock in the morning in June? In June, it's kind of nice. How do you like doing it in February? Hate it. Biggest reason why nobody wants to be a dairy farmer. It's those concrete floors in those dairy barns at 5 o'clock in the morning. It's cold, right? People have issues like that. So what's more important? People or project? Will you bend the project in order to accommodate and compromise with people? That's what they've been doing for 16 years. How well is that working out for them? It hadn't. What about us? Do we kind of modify the project just so that we can get enough people to work on it? Let's not build the temple quite so big. Let's use some lighter material. Maybe we can get enough people. If there's just 2 of us showing up to work, we can't pick up those blocks because we need 50 people. So let's build it a different way. You see how those pressures can come in? Or the faithful few show up and say, well, until we get 50 people here, we can't do nothing. So there they sit. You see how it can affect? And how a few people not showing up can affect the good work that others want to do? The people have been hired, haven't they? God went and got them. God went to the employment agency of man and found his workers over in Persia 16 years ago for this. And he went to them and said, I need some volunteers. Right? Now, in construction work, I used to live up there in Northern Virginia. And the day workers used to hang out where? In Manassas. At the 7-Eleven. If you were a contractor and you needed some day laborers, you would go down to one of the 7-Elevens in Manassas, and there'd be 20 or 30 guys standing around down there looking for day work. It's been that way in this country for the entire time we've been a country. Go down there and hire a couple of guys, $100, $200 a day. They work all day for you. You need them tomorrow, go down there and pick them up, get them in your truck, take them to work with you the next day. Day laborers, right? These people had been hired. He'd gone over there and got them. He'd brought them to where the job was. What was he basing their qualifications were? What was he looking for when he hired these people?
Faithful Christians.
Faithful. Remember, it says the Spirit of the Lord stirred up these people to go and do the work, and they volunteered to do it. That took a certain characteristic and personality to be willing to do that, right? I mean, they're fairly comfortable over there in Persia. This is the time of Esther. Not everything is bad. Some of them are getting pretty wealthy over there. But the qualifications to be a worker for the Lord. What kind of attitude do they have? So Haggai presents this lesson to the people concerning their need of a booster shot to remember the need for purification and holiness. What, for crying out loud, are they building? They're not building a bank. What are they building? The holy dwelling place of the Lord. The temple of the Lord. And is this building, as we've already seen, going to be significant in God's eternal plan in the near future? Yes, it is. It is extremely important in God's plan. And he's hired these people just to do that part of the plan. Too much to ask? Maybe so. So Haggai presents that lesson here. And he asks in this third sermon, as you read 10 through 19, Haggai asks two questions in this sermon. He starts out with a question. Okay, folks, does holiness make the unclean holy? Can holiness make something unclean holy? And the priest answered what?
No.
No. You understand that question? Everybody understand that question? I'm healthy. Larry's sick with the flu. I go sit by Larry and he gets healthy and the flu goes away because a healthy person sat next to the sick person. Is that how health works? Obviously, the answer is no. Second question. Okay, if the holy can't make the unholy or the unclean holy, can something unclean make the holy unclean? All right, let's change that. I'm sitting on the bench up here and I'm healthy. Larry's got the flu. Larry comes and sits by me. What happens to me? I was healthy. Now I can get unhealthy, can't I? I'm holy. I have been around unholiness for 16 years. And now what has happened to me? Not so holy anymore, am I? Maybe I need to do some repentance. Maybe I need to do some purification. Maybe I need to assess my holiness to work on this holy project of God. Do you see why Haggai's asking these two questions? What's he really addressing here? How good of an architects they are, or how good of construction workers they are? What's he really talking about here? Their heart. Are you still got the qualifications that I went and got you for? Or did you just think you could fake it until you could make it? You ever work with anybody like that? They give you this great resume and you hire them. And then pretty soon you find out from that resume is, well, you may have had that in your past, But you didn't learn anything from those experiences because you don't know how to do the job I've hired you to do. And they just thought they could come in and get the pay and fake it until they could make it. I'll figure it out on the job. I did that one time when I was a kid about swimming. I can't swim a lick, y'all. Swim just enough to save myself if we fall out of a boat. So don't ever take me fishing thinking I'm going to save you if we fall out, because I'll be lucky to save myself. And forget the fishing tackle. It's gone. When I was a little kid, I remember going to swimming with all my friends in summer camp, and they had a high dive. I remember now, I can't swim a lick. Did that stop me from jumping off the high dive? Nope. Not at all. I never worried about what was going to happen after I hit the water. I just wanted to be jumping and get that thrill of jumping off something high into a whole bunch of water with all my friends. You know, and it became pretty clear to me after I hit the water that I had an issue. Right? And then after I didn't drown and somehow managed to flounder over to the edge, from then on, did that stop me from jumping? No. I would just aim a little better about how close to the edge I jumped, so that when I jumped, I was within arm's reach of the concrete wall and I could just kind of reach out and grab it, right? That sounds silly, but the holy cannot make the unholy holy, but it can certainly, the unclean can make the holy unclean. So Haggai addresses them and says all of this. Israel has been holy, but they have touched the unclean, and it has affected this project of God's. And thus they have become unclean themselves, and it's hindering the work. So verses 15 and 18 have this to say in Haggai chapter 2. Look at verse 15. From these two simple questions, they've answered them correctly. He says, so is this people. In other words, so are you. And you look at that was in verse 14 and verse 15. But now do consider from this day onward, before one stone was placed on another in the temple of the Lord. Consider yourself. In other words, are you ready to go to work? Have you checked yourself before you left the house this morning? You know, you got your hammer, you got your level, you got your triangle, you got everything you need to do your job today? We do that without thinking in our own careers, don't we? Kind of self-check. Every time I go to leave the house, I'm going somewhere. Keys, wallet, phone, glasses. I do that every Sunday morning. Make sure I got everything I need to come in here and do this class. That's what he's telling them to do here. You've got a job to do. Check yourself. You got everything you need? From this day forward, you need to be prepared when you show up to work. Pretty challenging, isn't it? Now, if our faith is weak, what does that do to our labor? Why would he start in his first lesson with motivation? Gotta have it. If your faith is weak, your labor is going to fail. Right? There's going to be times where you don't want to get out of bed. You don't want to show up. You don't want to walk up Mount Zion. This work was at the top of a hill. Okay? Which meant every step of the way to work was uphill. But if your faith is strong, we will labor no matter what the odds are, and we'll trust that God will give the increase. If your faith is strong, if you think something's worth it, you'll keep after it when everybody else has quit. Anybody know who Tony Gwynn is? Am I just showing my age? Sports fans here? Tony Gwynn. Probably one of the best baseball hitters in the history of baseball. Played his whole career at San Diego Padres. Tony Gwynn, whether they played a game or not, would hit an average of 300 baseballs a day down in the stadium in the batting cage every day, 12 months a year. All his other teammates in the off season would be just taking it easy for a couple of months, resting up, catching up with the family, spending money on big vacations, buying big places. You know where Tony Gwynn was every day? In San Diego Stadium, down in the bowels of that building, in a batting cage hitting 300 baseballs. They say the same thing about Tiger Woods. They say the same thing about Michael Jordan in his day. How much time, more time every year he would spend in the gym compared to everybody else. And then play the games was just an afterthought because they were so prepared. Talk about muscle memory. It's all muscle memory for them. Tony Gwynn is in the Hall of Fame now because he trained his muscle memory to such a high degree that he became one of the best hitters in the history of the game. So the question is, what's your spiritual muscle memory? What's your muscle memory like? What's my muscle memory like? Or do I have to think about every single little thing I do for God? Have I trained myself? This work didn't happen. This temple didn't get built in just a day. It took some work. It took some effort. It was repetitive. How many blocks are in the Temple of Stone? I don't know, but there's a bunch of them. And if I'm a stone stacker, I had to do that job over and over and over again. Same thing. Right? Bend over, lift, place, bend over, lift, place, day in and day out till this job got done. But if my faith is strong, I would be the last one off the job every day. I think there's a point in there for us. Look at verse 18. That was verse 15. Look at verse 18. He says the same phrase again. Do consider from this day onward. From the day when the temple of the Lord was founded, consider. And then there's an interesting phrase in verse 19. He says, is the seed still in the barn? That's an interesting insert, isn't it? Because he's talking about consider their spiritual and their mindset when they go to do this work. And then he says in verse 19, is the seed still in the barn? What does that mean? What are your thoughts on that?
Probably it has to be sown.
Okay. Yeah. Can you feed yourself if you're a farmer and you've just left the seed in the barn? What happens?
Wow.
What happens with the seed? It just sits there, doesn't it? It doesn't do its job. Why? Is it the seed's fault? Whose fault is it? The sower's. The sower's the reason. Is the seed still in the barn? What do you get as a sower if you put the seed in the ground and put it to work? What do you get? Reward, don't you? You get a crop. You get a reward. And I think he's talking about here this idea of, he shifts a bit. He's talking about these blessings. They want blessings from God. Well, is your seed still in the barn? What comes first? Blessings or the work? We've already had this lesson, folks, from Haggai. If you will sow the seed, if you will just do the job, these blessings will flow to you that you're working so hard to try to gather, and then it just falls, goes away like dust, he said. He reminds them, your seed is still in the barn. That's really what he's saying to them. So get up and get after it and start spreading your seed. You know how to do it. You volunteered to do it. Go do it. Straightforward, isn't it? But he says at the end of verse 19, yet from this day on, I will bless you. Oh, that's different. That's new to this book. From today on, you're going to get paid. Now, what does that take? These people weren't just a bunch of slackers. Don't get that impression. What had they been doing? God said, if you'll do the work, you'll get blessings. And at the end of verse 19, he says, from today on, you're going to get some blessings. So what does that tell you? If God is faithful to his word. They've been doing some work. They have started doing the job. Because 3 months have gone by, right? or I'm sorry, 2 months have gone by. They have worked for 2 months from sermon number 1 and 2 to sermon number 3 and 4. They have worked for 2 months in faith. And now they're seeing some reward. From the day on, God says, you know what? You're not a volunteer anymore. Today you're going to start getting paid. Look at Galatians chapter 6. Galatians chapter 6 and verse 9. Let us not lose heart in doing good, for in due time we will reap if we do not grow weary. Could that verse be in Haggai? Right there at verse 19? Man, it fits like a joint, doesn't it? Keep our illustration building in our minds. It fits so tightly there. If you do not grow weary. They're going to get reward for their labor. Verse 19, from this day on, I will bless you. The people have proven their faith with their actions. Now God's going to send the blessings. Okay. Comments or questions about lesson 3, and then we'll take the last 15 minutes and cover lesson 4. The last sermon is a lot shorter, but it's presented the very same day as lesson 3. So we just studied the Sunday morning sermon, and now we're going to look at the sermon on Sunday night. Okay? So on the same day, we get sermon that you see the words in verse 20 through verse 23. And it's to send a message of assurance to these people. And it doesn't surprise me that it's set up this way. It's done on the same day. Now, and preachers will attest to this, I think. There's method in your madness as a preacher with what lessons you present when. There are certain topics and subjects and approaches you use on Sunday morning that don't fit as well as if you did it on Sunday night, and vice versa. There are some topics and approaches on Sunday night that perhaps are better for Sunday night than if you try to present it Sunday morning. Okay? Number one, is the audience the same on Sunday morning and Sunday night? Typically, no. In most places, no. Who's normally here on Sunday mornings, among other things? But what is the characteristic of a Sunday morning crowd versus a Sunday night crowd? What makes the difference?
So maybe it's the majority of the congregation.
Okay, more the majority.
Yeah.
Some of those who maybe aren't in the core or as committed to that local congregation. Who else typically is there? When do you have most of your visitors? Non-Christians. A friend is invited to come with them. Typically, that's Sunday morning. People on vacation, passing through. We get that all the time here. Typically, Sunday morning, and then they're traveling further away and they won't be with us on Sunday night. They've moved on down the road or something like that, right? I understand that, right? We have done that our whole adult life, Joan and I, when we travel. We'll stop and worship somewhere Sunday morning, but Sunday night, we're not going to sit around for 4 hours when we're trying to get to Texas to see a grandbaby. We're going to get to Arkansas and worship there Sunday night, right? But the point is, this last sermon is on the same day. Okay, so let's see, how does he approach these same people with a separate sermon on the second day? It's like, wow, we got to hear from you again. This message is extremely, again, positive in its nature. He has told them they're going to start getting blessings. Wow, that's great. Let's just stop right there. Oh no, we got another sermon to go, and you're going to get it today. Y'all come back. Man, they're going to come back because they've been told they're going to start getting blessings. In this fourth sermon, in the last part of chapter 2, look at verse 23. Here's another phrase. On that day, declares the Lord of hosts, I will take you, Zerubbabel. Now, who's Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel?
He's the
Governor,
Yeah.
right? One of the main characters in this book, a leader. I'm going to take you, Zerubbabel, declares the Lord, and I will make you like a signet ring For I have chosen you, declares the Lord of hosts. This assurance that they're on the right track, folks. For 2 months, you've been working. You're doing great. Zerubbabel, I'm so impressed with you as a leader of these people to get this going. And from today onward, you're going to be as a signet ring to these people in this project. You think Zerubbabel went away with a little more lift in his step after hearing this sermon? Do you think the people are going to rely more on Zerubbabel and give him more confidence and perhaps make him a better leader because they're more willing to even follow? Yeah, all of that is working. Haggai's got them leaning into the work. Okay, they're digging in. They are leaning into the harness here. And Zerubbabel is complimented for helping get that done as a leader. For I have chosen you. What a great honor to have this said about you. Look at Matthew 1. Matthew 1 and verse 12. Talk about an honor. Who's coming? Why are we building this temple again? Who's coming? The branch from Zechariah, Jesus, the Messiah is coming. Look at the honor that's given Zerubbabel. In Matthew chapter 1, verse 12, we have the genealogy of the branch. After the deportation to Babylon, Jeconiah became the father of Shealtiel. And Shealtiel, the father of Zerubbabel. The branch is going to be the great, I could almost count these up. I didn't do this ahead of time. The great grandson of Zerubbabel. Jesus Christ is in the family of Zerubbabel. You think he's honored by that? I do. What an honor. After seeing so many of God's people leaders who were negligent, it is assuring and comforting to see Zerubbabel and Joshua, the high priest in this time frame, seeking to do what's right. Isn't that refreshing? How many times have we studied in the Old Testament where leaders failed and digressed, chased after foreign idols, chased after foreign women? All of those things over and over and over again. There's really very few righteous leaders in Israel's history. There's very few. But Zerubbabel's one of them. You think David was proud of Zerubbabel as his descendant? Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Thank you, Zerubbabel. That would be David's call. Thank you for helping prepare the way for the righteous branch who will sit on my throne as God has said. It's a powerful lesson that we're given. Let's look for just a minute then at the 3 reasons Haggai was successful. There's 3 reasons why he was successful. And the first one is he knew where to start. Where did Haggai start with this message of accomplishing building the temple? For 16 years, 14 since the foundation, nobody's picked it up. Where did he start? You remember? He went to who? He went to Zerubbabel and he went to Joshua first. He went to the leaders first. If you want a project of work, you start at the top. You got to get buy-in at the top. Otherwise, it's just going to crumble under its own weight. Right? He knew where to start. Haggai knew where he was going. Was his message confusing? Go build the walls, go build the temple, work on your own houses, redig the aqueduct. No, he was singular in his focus. He knew where he was going. This is where we are. We're 14 years in arrears since the foundation was laid. We got to get to the finished temple. That's the goal. Finish the temple. He knew where he was going, and that's the center of his message. And he knew who to give credit to. How many times do we see from this day forward, or the Lord said, Haggai doesn't take this message upon himself and says, well, this is what I think. He put it all back into this is God's project. We need to do it because God said so. He knew who to give the credit to. Haggai accomplished in 4 months. Y'all, only 4 months in this book. From grass growing in the cracks of the foundation to being done. 4 months. There's a lot of people necessary to motivate and get this job done in 4 months to build a building the size of the temple. How long did it take them to build these apartment buildings over here? You've been watching that? 2 years? I think it's finally done. There are a few people living in a few of those apartments now, but not, I'm sure it's not fully occupied. It took them almost 2 years to build that. And they're motivated by money, right? Haggai built the temple that we see in Jerusalem up through AD 70 in 4 months with no electricity and no machines. It's pretty impressive. It's pretty impressive. Now, I want us to look back at Ezra chapter 5 in conclusion. In Ezra, where am I? In Ezra, where is it? Oh, I gotta find it. Sorry, oh, there we go. Ezra chapter 5. In Ezra chapter 5, don't forget how all this goes together. In Ezra chapter 5, verses 1 and 2, when we read this at the beginning of our study in Haggai, when the prophets, Haggai the prophet and Zechariah the son of Iddu, prophesied to the Jews who were in Judah and Jerusalem in the name of God of Israel, who was over them. Then Zerubbabel the son of Shealtiel and Jeshua the son of Jozadak arose and began to build the house of God, which is in Jerusalem. And the prophets of God were with them, supporting them. Now look at chapter 6, verses 14 and 15. This is how Ezra sums it up. And the elders of the Jews were successful in building through the prophesying of Haggai the prophet and Zechariah the son of Iddu. And they finished building according to the command of the God of Israel. Why were the people successful in building the building according to Ezra chapter 6? They were successful through the prophesying of Haggai and Zechariah. Pretty impressive. These were mighty men. They had to be charismatic. I don't know how you motivate 40,000 people and not have that kind of personal aura or demeanor. These were accomplished men. They weren't dodos. They weren't stupid. They're brilliant. And they're hardworking, and God chose them. And the message he gave them, they conveyed to the people, and they got it done. Is there any work that God wants us to do that we cannot accomplish? Folks, there is not. What is the key ingredient then? Faith. Faith. Is there anybody that can't be reached with the gospel? Why this? Everybody want to say no? Well, I got an uncle, man. You could hit him over the head with the gospel. He wouldn't pay no attention. He don't want it. Well, that may be. But he might listen to somebody. Does that give you the right not to get out of bed and go to work on Mount Zion every morning? No. Just because your Uncle Clevis doesn't want to hear it Does that mean that you've got the right to leave Uncle Clevis alone? There's no amount of faith that can't answer the call of God. He may or may not be the right person. Jonah didn't even want the job, did he? He ran the other direction. But God said, you're the man. And what happened? The Nineveh of all cities. They repented after 40 days. They repented. All right.
Similar lesson with John the Baptist today. So with my lesson sermon will kind of imitate those points. So
Great. Great. I hope this helps. Haggai is an interesting study. He is so focused and pointed. It's like he's half of the book of James. Work, 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 work. Gotta work. But what do you leave out if you do that? Faith. Haggai doesn't leave out faith. It's here. But what do you have to have first? Work, faith, blessings come from that, right? So what we're seeing in Haggai is not a different message than what James brings us. It's all necessary. All right, we will start Malachi next week. Malachi's next week. Comments on Haggai? We got a couple of minutes before we begin our worship. Somebody can knock on the kids' doors. All right. Well, we'll begin the book of Malachi next week. We'll be in that book for a couple of weeks. There's a lot of messages in the last book, in the final word that God's got for his people. And it's all applicable. Malachi is all about application lessons. Okay? All right. Appreciate everybody tuning in. We'll begin our work.